Friends, I am very glad to meet you again, and we are glad to welcome you. This video is already a full-fledged lesson on working with our new products from the Vintage Winter series. And in this video tutorial, friends, we will begin to analyze in detail how to work with automatic actions from the Vintage Winter panel of the same name. There are only two groups of action games in the Vintage Winter panel, a group of basic correction and a group with vintage tinting. Despite the fact that there are only 13 actions in the basic correction group, you can also use them to process any photo, even taken on a glider, even a Studio One, which you observe in the examples I demonstrate. But I must clarify right away, friends, that if you are working with a large studio portrait and you need a more thorough, more detailed retouching, the actions from this panel will not be enough for you. In this case, you either retouch in the ways that you are actually used to, or if you are our buyer and have our other panels, and in almost all of our panels, there are actions for detailed and high-quality retouching. Use them. But for most outdoor winter photo images and for cards taken during New Year's photo shoots, the actions from the basic correction section are more than enough. And now, as an example to you, friends, I will immediately make a small basic correction and add a vintage effect to this photo image that you see on the screen at the moment with just 4 actions. The first action is called Correction, color number 4 for the basic correction. And the first step to vintage tinting is an action game called Vintage Winter. I added saturation to colors and shades using the winter saturated color operation, and then added a warm vintage vignette to the photo image using the background and vignette action. And you must agree, friends, without even going into the tinting section, the image has already acquired a rather pleasant vintage look. Well, let's turn to tinting anyway, and I will apply action toning cold heat. The vintage effect has intensified even more, and we have already got a real vintage card. Let's apply another action of tinting. For example, this is the tinting of a retro photo. The card has become softer and warmer, and the vintage effect has become a little different, but no less attractive. Agree, friends? Also, in this card, please look, only a few actions from the panel were used, and a background frame was also used from the Vintage Winter set, and in the end, it turned out to be such a wonderful vintage postcard. Well, come on, friends, don't stuff it on the Skorenkaya as it is now, but already deal in more detail with the actions from the Vintage Winter panel. All vintage pictures are distinguished by the ultra-smoothness of the model's skin. Therefore, in this Vintage Winter panel, I did not include retouching actions, but included an action called a hand-drawn effect, which will perform ultra-smoothing of the skin of models in your photos, remove noise, but at the same time add sharpness. And also with this operation, a stylized hand-drawn effect is created on the photo. It is this action that in most cases we run first when processing any photo image in vintage style. After completing this action, a group will appear in the layers palette. You should deploy it. The bottom layer, called the hand-drawn effect, as you noticed, brightens the photo image. In most cases, I cover it with a black mask and a brush selectively. In detail, yes, I show lightening. Well, mainly on the compositional center. This is accordingly on the model. The layer that is located above is covered with a black mask, and it is on it that the so-called hand-drawn effect is located. You should work on it with a soft white brush. Adjust its opacity, please. This effect looks very good on some fur products of animals, on the hair of models, and also on clothes. With the help of this action, showing yes its actions, we can slightly smooth out the folds on clothes and generally level out minor defects in the image. This is the effect obtained as a result of this action in this photo, which is what we wanted, a smooth picture, smooth skin. This is what we have. A certain effect of drawing is also present. The next action that I would really like to draw your attention to, friends, is an action called correction color. They go under the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. I highly recommend each photo image to apply all these 4 actions at once, and each one individually gives great interest in correction colors. Yes, on the photo images. And they can also be combined by applying 2, 3, and possibly all 4 of these actions at the same time. Applicable to this photo, I limited myself to one action called correction color number 1, and then in most cases increase the saturation of the photo image. To do this, I run an operation called winter saturated color. But it is this saturated color on the background that is not very desirable, so I gather the 2 previous actions into a group. I close the group with a black mask, collecting respectively to show all the color tone effects on the model. In order to make our work easier, and in general, we will need a model allocation in the future when we work with a set of vintage winter add-ons. In the Layers palette, I switch to the layer with the image of the model and use the wonderful Photoshop function to highlight it. Menu Selection Object. This function automatically highlights the main object in the photo image. It stands out from version to version just great. And in this case, this automatic allocation is quite enough for us, friends. And so that we don't have to refer to this function every time, we will simply save the selection. Go to the selection menu, Save Selection. And we can always find the saved cutout in the Channels palette. And now we're going to need it. Go to the Channels palette, hold down this key, click once on the icon with a cutout. The selection is activated, and we go to the Layers palette. We stand on the mask of the group on which we want to show saturation and color correction only on the model. Fill this active selection with just white. And all of our previous correction using 2 actions was fully manifested on the model. And now we can safely edit these corrections, either by drawing on the mask, somewhere showing, somewhere reducing the effect of the correction, or adjusting the opacity of the group itself. And since we have a winter card, we will add a cold day to the winter coldness with the help of the operation. And this, friends, is just a magical operation. If you click on the information icon, an information plate will appear to the right of the action, which fully describes how this action works and what possible applications of this action are possible. And friends, I highly recommend that you do not just click on the action buttons, open groups, work with adjustment layers, and also experiment with the overlay mode. Because you see, friends, we give you a tool, and you need to learn and be able to work with a tool. And if you learn and will be able to work with this tool, it will really turn out to be a magic wand in your hands. But here, I just used this operation to add cold shades to the photo image and adjusted the opacity to the percentage that seemed appropriate to me in this photo. Then, you can apply an operation called softness and darkening. This action will make the shadows on your photo image a little darker, which will give the correct acceptable contrast, and add glowing, soft, pleasant tones and shades to the card. To enhance this action, either increase the opacity in the layer obtained after completing this operation, or duplicate this layer several times to the effect you need. Next, I will perform the same manipulations as with the group of previous actions. Since I do not want to see the effects of the previous two actions again in the background, I gather these two actions into a group, close them again with a black mask, and show color and tone effects only on the model. To do this, I use the ready-made cutout of the model again, but in this case, we absolutely cannot go into the channels, since we already have this cutout on the bottom of the lying mask. We also press this key, and the cutout is activated. And now, friends, you can work with the background, and let me tell you in more detail how you can work with actions that will help us edit the background. And one of these actions is called a background vignette. We launch it. This action looks very good in its natural form on winter, mainly street cards, or on light studio ones. In the same photo image, it looks somehow not very expressive, right? Let's expand the group and analyze the layers. Layer number 1 is in normal overlay mode, layer number 2 is in screen overlay mode, and layer number 3 has the linear dimmer overlay mode enabled. What does this mean? If we want to change the tones on the image, we will work with layer number 2 and 3 and change the color gradients there. If we want to completely change the color of our vignette, of course, we have to work with layer number 1 and change the gradient there, which in fact I did. Double-click on the gradient icon. A window opens where we can adjust the gradient. I took a color sample directly from the background of the photo image and made this solid light purple gradient. And here, I decided to experiment with the gradient. I made a duplicate of this lilac layer. I copied the color from the model's blouse in advance. This light one is a delicate peach. I added it to the new gradient, friends, and added it. Also, I made the gradient fill with this color solid, and then, changing the percentage of opacity of these two gradients, peach and lilac, I mixed them. The two upper adjustment layers at number 2 and 3 were left untouched, native, let's say. I raised the fill for the whole group to a maximum of 100%, that is, I filled the card with a solid color, which turned out to be the result of all manipulations. And of course, now we need to develop a model. It is absolutely not necessary for us to refer to the cutout. Here we can just work with a brush. Choose a soft round standard brush. We take the color for the brush black, set the opacity of the brush to the maximum, and develop the model. We leave the edges of the fill soft. Contrasting edges here will just look rough and ugly. And by and large, you agree, friends, right? Without even touching on the set of additions. Vintage Winter has already turned out to be quite a pleasant and interesting card, with a vintage bias. Here, friends, I want to clarify one of your questions that you ask quite often. Is it possible to use these products of a set of add-ons and Vintage Winter panels separately? I can say with confidence that the panel itself is self-sufficient and quite functional, which you are convinced of with every step in this video tutorial. But with a set of add-ons, it is desirable to use this panel. Since the set is vintage, it assumes vintage effects on the photo image, which can be added using this panel easily and simply. Well, or either you add them in some of your own ways already on your own. Despite the fact that the image looks pretty good already, I still lack some kind of winter tenderness. I will turn to our vintage tinting. I use a tinting called Winter Morning to add delicate winter shades. This is how it looks in full force, but I will lower the percentage of opacity. And look, it turned out to be a delicate vintage image. But in this case, I want to make the model's face a little brighter and richer. To do this, of course, I turn on the mask, work with a black brush on the mask, Wipe off the delicate vintage effect of tinting. Show saturation, contrast, and color on the model's face. Let's put all the layers with corrections together in a group and look at our result of working on the photo only using the actions from the Vintage Winter panel. How do you like it, friends? I hope I have convinced you that the panel itself is self-sufficient and quite functional, despite a small number of actions. But since this is not the last, of course, video on working with this panel, so that the demonstration of the possibilities of actions from this panel in the future, you will be even more surprised and amazed. Well, in the next video, friends, I will show you in detail and tell you how everything works with the same one photo. Using materials from a set of add-ons, Vintage Winter will make these variants of excellent Vintage Winter postcards. So friends, this of course is absolutely not the last video on how to work with tools and materials Vintage Winter. Videos will be released on a regular basis, and I hope that from next year we will start releasing webinars where I will show you live in detail and explain how to work with actions from our panels. And now, I sincerely want to thank you for your attention to our products, to our lessons, and in general, to all our activities. I am very, very grateful to you, friends, for this, and I wish you all the best. And until the earliest meetings.